To be honest with you guys, I've been stood here for the past 20 minutes thinking, where do I start? What do I do now? This C63 has got to be one of the most expensive rebuilds that I've ever done. Brand new parts from Mercedes and used parts as well are just ridiculously expensive, and this is a 2012 car. So in the last video we managed to replace the damaged subframe along with all the damaged sumps as well. And whilst I was down there, it was only right to upgrade the exhaust to long tube headers, which you can just see with that super tight fitment. Now, I don't really have a set plan on what's next, but I know I need to finish off the subframe job because there's a few things that are left unconnected, so let's go do that. So this C63 is going to be one hell of a ride. It was involved in a massive accident back in 2020 and we still can't work out what exactly happened, but it's left it with smashed windows, damage all along one side of the car, a lot of suspension damage and a few bits which are going to be a little bit unexpected. But carrying on where I left off from, I've got to connect the steering column to the actual steering rack. This is a little bit fiddly to get your hands up and behind the subframe, but I managed it in the end. Now it's just a case of connecting the suspension arms up to the subframe and then the track rod ends up to the wheel hub. And then exactly the same for the other side. Now a lot of people ask where I learned to do all this, and well, if you can't tell, I just learn as I go along. So if I do make any mistakes, please let me know in the comment section below. Just missing now is a few support bars for the subframe, which I've got to put back on, and a new bolt for the front suspension arm. And next up is the anti-roll bar. The anti-roll bar is a little bit fiddly to get on because it uses a nut and a bolt instead of just having threads tapped into the subframe. And finally, an under tray or a sort of support tray to hold everything all underneath. One thing that was damaged in the accident is the drop link on the driver's side, so I've got a new one to pop on. Again, pretty easy to install. And that should about cover the suspension. Okay, so we now have all the suspension on, the subframe on, the steering rack connected, and it still looks exactly the same. I'd say this part of the build is probably the most unsatisfying part of the build, but at least now all the wheels are in a straight line to an extent and all the suspension arms are connected. As you guys know, this is probably one of the biggest builds that I've ever taken on, so it is going to take a little longer than usual, especially for a sort of learn it as you go along mechanic. There's just little things like these wires and these wires which just make things that little bit harder because you have no idea where they're going. Now, because the new subframe bolted up to the chassis quite easily and there was no issues, we can tell that the chassis is straight in that area. Now, we still have this part of the chassis to deal with, which is a little bit bent, but we'll deal with that later because I want to get on with this front end. Now, quite clearly, there is a lot of damage to the front end, but luckily enough, there's no damage to the actual chassis rails, which are here. We know there's damage to the oil cooler because we replaced it with this silicone pipe, so we need to get a new oil cooler. And strangely enough, the radiator still holds coolant. But it is best that we replace the radiator because, well, it's dropping to pieces and it took a fair amount of the hit. So let me start stripping this front end and work out what parts are worth keeping and what parts are just scrap. Take it away, take it away. Now, although this 6.2 litre engine is absolutely huge, the front end was pretty easy to access and quite easy to remove actually. It comes apart in sections. There's a top part and then you can access the top radiator hoses, which just unclip like this. I can then drain all the coolant out. And then once I've done that, I can access the fan at the back, which literally just unclips from the radiator. And of course, there's an electrical connector on the fan as well, which then gives you quite good access to the front of the car if you were to change any belts. But we want to get the rad pack off, so that's exactly what we're about to do. Now, something I didn't expect is that there to be any gas left in the aircon condenser. And that is not the way to dispose of the gas in the aircon, but I genuinely thought there was going to be no gas in there. But you live and you learn. Now, as this car sat for so long, the engine is so dusty and just in need of a little bit of a clean, so I did the best I could inside the unit without using a jet wash. And once I gave it a little bit of wipe down, it's time to top it off with a little bit of Silishine. And there we go, it's looking a little bit better than it was before. Okay, so apart from the little accident with the aircon, that went okay, and the engine is looking a little bit cleaner, the best I could do inside anyway. So the good news is there's no damage to the front of the engine here, which we kind of already know. We've got the power steering cooler, which has got, again, no damage. I think this is a cooler for maybe the transmission fluid, but again, that's looking all good. But a lot of the pipes and a lot of the bolts are all sort of rusty. It looks like a car that's sat there for a long time, which, well, it has. Now this is really where most of the damage is, and to be honest, it's not even that damage, it works. As you've seen, the aircon still holds aircon gas. Well, not anymore. Now, as if by magic, I do have a new coolant radiator. Now, I'm gonna put the fresh new radiator on because all of these tabs on the side here, which actually hold the oil cooler, which sits on the front, well, they're all intact as you would expect from a new one. Whereas on the damaged one, well, these are all damaged. So although it does hold coolant, it's not gonna hold the oil cooler. So I think I am gonna replace the aircon condenser as well, but I can do that whilst it's on the car. For now, I'm gonna put the old aircon condenser on that and then pop it on the car, and then once a new one comes, we can switch it over. So a new aircon condenser is definitely needed. Yet again, another expense for this expensive C63 rebuild. Now, if only I could have just built an aircon condenser myself. Now, I can't build an aircon condenser, but I'll tell you what I can build. An amazing website, of course, using Squarespace. Now, whilst I figure out how to swap the condenser over to the new radiator, let me tell you that Squarespace does everything from websites to online stores to marketing tools and analytics. If you don't believe me how easy it is to create a website using Squarespace, check this out. So once you've headed to squarespace.com, you can choose a template which best suits your style, and there's loads to choose from. Once you've got your template, you can go in and it's as easy as dragging and dropping your own logo in like this, and dragging and dropping your own photos in just like this. From there, you can simply edit or remove text, you can change buttons. The possibilities are really endless. There's also a cool feature which allows you to switch between mobile view and desktop view, and we're not even touching the surface. So when you need a website, go to squarespace.com or just click the link in the description box below, and when you're ready to launch, use code Matt Armstrong, and that's going to give you 10% off your first website or domain name. Right, let's see how I'm getting on with this. So back on goes the radiator pack with the aircon condenser, the new radiator, and of course all the different coolers which connect to it. I've then got to connect all the coolant pipes back onto the radiator and then slide back in the fan for the radiator. Nothing floating. Now this is the front lower oil cooler, and I bought this from Mercedes because it was cheaper at £423. The price is on the screen because it was that unbelievable. Trying to find a second-hand oil cooler was really hard, and when I did, it was actually more expensive than going to Mercedes directly. Can you believe it? But that's not all, it gets worse. This is another oil cooler which sits just in front of the driver's wheel. This is a second-hand part and I paid £550 for this. From Mercedes Direct it is £501, but you don't actually get the electric fan that you can see attached to the front of it, which I can imagine being another huge expense. And then all this plastic shroud which goes over the front of the oil cooler, well, we'll get to that. But with the oil coolers on, I can now connect all the pipes that lead to it. Now, as a lot of you guys know, in most of my videos, I encourage all you guys to get out on the tools, get working on your own car, or get a project car. But in this instance, I'm going to discourage it. If your car or a project car that you're looking at has this logo on it, then I would stay clear. Look at this. Anything on the C63 which has the AMG logo, like this, like this, like this, is just extortionate prices, even second hand. So these parts are all AMG only. They don't come on the standard C-Class models, but let me show you an example. So here's the coolant reservoir here. The clips are broken at the back, so I'm going to have to order a new one. Now that coolant tank doesn't say AMG on it, so you'll find that coolant tank on all other C-Classes. And as you can see on eBay here, they're all reasonably priced, all under or a little bit over £20. But let's just take this plastic shroud for example. AMG logo, all it does is just sort of guide the air into the oil cooler. Bear in mind this is second hand as well. £47.59, and it's even got a crack in the corner of it. So this car is only going to get more and more expensive, but I've done it now, we might as well crack on. To be honest, I don't know why I'm acting surprised. I got myself into this, and I guess it is a C63 AMG. But if you're rebuilding this car and hope to make a massive profit, then it's really not the best idea. Now there's still oil lines which I need to connect up to both of the oil coolers, and then once they're connected I can then pop on the new crash bar, well, the brand new second-hand crash bar that I got off eBay. And lucky enough it does all line up, so we can tell the chassis legs are pointing in a straight line. Then there's a final few bits of plastic shroud that I replaced on the top, which again were from Mercedes, but not badly priced. We're absolutely flying ahead now. It's starting to look a little bit more like a car. Now these wires, which are sort of leading to nowhere on the front, I think I've sussed it. So this oil cooler does have its separate fan there, and it does have an electrical connector there, which has two quite thick wires. So we're gonna have to re-pin and get a plug for that. As for this one, I am not too sure yet, but there is a bracket which came on this crash bar which mounts something, and I can only think that is what it's meant to be going to, but we'll find out about that. As for this side, it's looking okay over here. It looks as if I'm gonna have to get a new horn. These have taken a fair amount of beating, and I'll be surprised if that works. This is a secondary air pump, and it's got a little crack in it here, but I can't see why that wouldn't work. It's probably not worth replacing that just because of that crack. Now everything is all connected, all the electrical connectors are connected, apart from the horn, because I just think that needs replacing. Headlights. Now we all know how it goes on this channel with headlights. I don't have much luck, and this time I've actually gone for aftermarket headlights. Now although they are aftermarket, they're supposed to be OEM equivalent, so they look pretty much exactly like OEM headlights, apart from they're, well, not OEM. And even though they're not OEM, it's still kind of close to the OEM price. £1,100 for two headlights, and it doesn't even come complete. So this is the only headlight which was left on the car, and as you can see, it's aged a fair amount, and I thought if I'm going to replace one headlight and it's going to be super shiny and nice and new and leave an old one on, I think it's just going to look weird. Plus I do think that this has got some damage to the inside, and it's not supposed to wiggle around and move like that. Now the only thing that these headlights didn't come with are the ballast here, and these sort of power up the LED lights, and it didn't come with that ballast or that ballast there. I still haven't found out how expensive they are, but we can change these ones onto those ones, apart from we don't have the other headlight to do that for that one. But before I get too excited, I want to see whether these OEM equivalent headlights actually work first. So I'm going to switch over the ballast from the one I've got, and we're going to plug it in and see if it works. So here we go. This seems to be a regular occasion on the channel, changing out new headlights and hoping they work. Now on a lot of newer cars, as we've found out, when you change the headlight, they do tend to need to be coded to the car, but on this one, a 2011, I'm hoping not so much. It's just down to whether this headlight is actually compatible with this car. Well, it looks good. Let's see if it works. I've just put the jumper pack on it. Please, for the sake of my bank account, I hope this works. Right. Ignition. In the ignition. Ignition on. Headlights on. Please, please, please. I can see light. Yes, come on. Yeah, I don't know why headlights just excite me when they work, but you guys would know how many headlights I've bought and they're just not work. But yes. Okay, passenger side headlight is working. We just need the ballast for the driver's side. You are not going to believe how much a second-hand bonnet cost me. I did get it for £100 cheaper, but still £900 for a second-hand bonnet. 900, it was up for £1,000. I suppose I better get fit in it.
The money on my mind, I count it every time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I count it.
Wow, just look at it. It's perfect, but a slightly different shade of black. It sort of reminds me of the first C63 that I bought, but we won't talk about that. Now I feel like this video will be so satisfying if we could pop the wheels on, lower it down, and actually drive this outside of its own accord for the first time. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. I need to pop some coolant in. Well, I'm just going to put water in because we do need to change that broken expansion tank when it arrives. But if we pop some water in, see if everything's all watertight, roll this thing out, and then we can assess the rest of the damages. Oh, she looks so much better on the ground, and we've got the jumper pack on because we still have to bridge the line between the pyrotechnics fuse and the battery as well, just because we still haven't replaced the airbags which are inside. Now we need to run this thing, let the coolant go around the system and in the radiator, and let it sort of self-bleed itself. Then we can top it up and we can finally pull this out of its own accord. First time. Are we running? She's driving. We've got the dash lit up like a Christmas tree. It's telling me to release the parking brake, and I have released it, but it's still on. Don't know why that's on. But the good news, she's driving. Ignore that, and yeah, ignore the windows, and yeah, she's driving. Come on. Now I would say she's looking good, but that would be a lie. She's looking better. The engine is sounding nice and quiet. The fan is on all the time, but I feel like that's some sort of safety feature because we still haven't connected up the oil cooler fan. But overall, we've made some decent progress here. We have obviously got a lot more damage all down the side here, and you can see all of these are all, this is all dented all down the side. We've got still no window at all, which we need to replace, and we've got dreadful scratches here, which maybe could have been a barbed wire fence or something like that. At the back, she's okay from behind. Moving on to the passenger side, obviously we've still got this part of the chassis to sort out, which we will get to. We have got a fairly big dent in the driver's door there, and the wheels, well, I think they've had their day. A lot of them are all dented, welded, and all scratched up in there. I mean, the interior is, well, that's another story. The whole of the interior, the airbags have gone. I've removed this airbag because I need to remove the steering wheel to place the steering wheel in a straight place, and well, it's not the cleanest in here at all. The good news though is that we've got a sunroof, and it actually works. Come on. This is just getting me more and more excited to finally fix this in and get it out on the road, but I still feel like we're a long way from that. Now this is the first time I've actually heard the exhaust with the manifolds on outside. Let me show you this. It's absolutely insanely loud. And the good news, she seems to have ran all up to temperature with, fingers crossed, no issues. Yes, we've got plenty of lights we need to assess, but we'll get to that as well. But I can't thank you all enough for watching the video, and if you've enjoyed this, hit that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.
Drug that I just can't deny.